She signed it. That's the part that never leaves you. Not the two lawyers. Not the armed man standing just outside the door. Not the way the room smelled, leather and old money and something cold underneath both of them, like marble. Not even the document itself, which used words like breach of trust and termination for cause in fonts that had been chosen to look final. The part that stays is the pen moving, blue ink, white paper. Her full name written without hesitation, because hesitating would have required her to look up, and looking up would have meant looking at him, and she had already decided she would not do that. She would not give him that. Not today. What she pressed against her stomach with her left hand that she did not decide. That was the body deciding for itself, the way the body does when it knows something is in danger. She was 11 weeks pregnant with his child. She signed, she stood, and she walked out. Dominic Ferrante did not watch her go. He had already moved on to the next item on his screen. Now I need you to hold that image, her at that desk, signing her own name into disappearance, because the question that drives this entire story isn't why she kept the secret. It's what happened the morning the secret ended, and whether when that door finally opened, she was the one holding it or he was. Nora Vassell was 26 the first time she walked through the service entrance of the Ferrante estate. She wasn't supposed to stay long, 1 month, maybe 2. Her aunt had fractured her wrist, the position needed filling, and Nora needed the money badly enough not to ask too many questions about the kind of house that had a service entrance separate from the main gate. She was good at the work, better than good. She was the kind of person who solved problems before anyone noticed they existed, who noticed the things other people walked past, who could read a room in 3 seconds and calibrate herself accordingly. In another life, in another city, those skills would have had different names on a resume. In this life, they made her useful. In the Ferrante world, useful was the only thing that kept you safe. Dominic Ferrante ran the legitimate surface of a family that had spent 3 generations building things, real estate, city contracts, hospitality, while spending the same 3 generations determining who in Chicago could operate and who couldn't. His grandfather built it with muscle. His father built it with lawyers. Dominic ran it with patience, the coldest weapon in any room. He never rushed. He never raised his voice. He never, in 3 years of Nora working in his house, acknowledged her as anything other than competent and invisible. Until the night he came home at 1 a.m. with a cut along his left forearm and the kind of silence around him that meant the night had gone badly. She was the only one still awake. She didn't ask. She got the kit, cleaned the wound, set a glass of whiskey on the counter beside him without a word. He watched her hands the entire time. When she finished, he said thank you in a voice she had never heard from him, like a man who had forgotten the word existed and was surprised to find it still worked. That was the beginning. 6 weeks. No names for it, no structure, nothing acknowledged in daylight. Then a family crisis pulled him across state lines, associates arrived, and the estate shifted overnight from a home into something operational. Whatever had existed between them was sealed shut. Not ended, sealed. The way you close a room you are not ready to empty. 2 weeks later, $40,000 was missing from the household accounts. The estate's external camera showed Nora walking toward the east wing at 10:47 p.m. It did not show her walking past the finance office without entering, because the internal corridor camera had been offline for scheduled maintenance that night. Nobody flagged the maintenance log. Nobody asked why the only night the camera was down happened to be that night. Nobody asked Nora anything. They showed her the external footage. They told her what it looked like. They told her the investigation was complete. By that point, she already knew she was pregnant. She had known for 4 days. She sat in that room with 2 lawyers and a document and the man who had not yet looked up from his phone, and she made the decision in the time it took her to pick up the pen. She would not tell him, not from spite, from math. She had spent 3 years in this house watching how power protected itself, who it sacrificed when the math required it, who it never once paused to listen to. She knew what an inconvenient truth became in this world. It became a liability. And she was not going to let her child be someone's liability. She signed. She left. And then she did the hardest thing she had ever done. She started over. Stay with me, because what I'm about to show you is what starting over actually costs. Not the version people tell at dinner parties. The real version. And it's going to change how you hear everything that comes after. The first winter was the one she never talked about later. Cincinnati, her sister's fold-out couch. 2 weeks of pretending she was fine until the morning. She woke up and couldn't stand without leaning against the wall. Morning sickness and fear, indistinguishable from each other, working in shifts. Her sister made her tea and didn't ask questions because she could see from Nora's face that the questions would cost more than the answers were worth. On day 15, Nora packed her bag and went back to Chicago. Not because she had a plan, because running required resources she didn't have, and staying hidden in a city of 3 million was easier than running to a smaller one. She found a room in Bridgeport. Cash in hand cleaning work, 3 office buildings downtown, 9 p.m. to 3 a.m. She ate once a day for the first 2 months because the prenatal vitamins cost more than she'd expected, and she refused to let the math change. She walked the 40 minutes to work because bus fare compounded. She did not allow herself to calculate what she'd left behind. Not the income, not the safety, not the particular silence of a man who had once watched her hands like they were the only still thing in the room. She did not allow herself to feel anything about him at all. She was 5 months along when the company she cleaned forcut her from the roster. The manager didn't give a reason. He didn't need to. She had started showing, and the math had changed. She stood outside the building on a Tuesday night in December, 19 degrees, and she had one of those moments that arrive quietly without warning, where the full weight of what you are carrying lands on you all at once. Every decision, every night, everything you have chosen to protect, pressing down on your chest while Chicago traffic moved past you, like you were already invisible. She stood there for a minute, maybe 2. Then she walked to the next block and knocked on the door of a different cleaning company and asked if they were hiring. They were. Mila was born in March in a public hospital, delivered by a nurse with warm hands who didn't once let go when Nora needed to hold something. She was 7 pounds 4 ounces. She arrived already looking like she intended to be here, and she had her father's eyes, silver gray ringed with green. Unmistakable. Nora had known it was possible, had spent months telling herself it wouldn't happen, wouldn't be that specific, wouldn't be that visible, but there they were, looking up at her from her daughter's face, clear and calm and permanent. She held Mila against her chest and stayed very still for a long time. Then she made the second decision. She would build something, not just survive, build, for both of them. Because Mila was going to grow up watching her mother demonstrate what it looked like to make something out of nothing, and that demonstration was going to be the first and most important thing she ever taught her. It took 4 years. By the time Mila started kindergarten, Nora had a registered company, 7 employees, a small office in a shared workspace in Pilsen, and the first real health insurance she had ever been able to offer her staff, a detail she had promised from the beginning and finally delivered on a Tuesday morning in February, printing the enrollment forms herself. She did not think about Dominic Ferranti, or rather, she thought about him in the way you think about an old injury. You don't dwell on it, but on certain days, certain angles, you feel it. Then the bid came through for a new commercial tower in River North. The building management system generated the contract automatically. Nora's company had the best price and the strongest client record in the vendor pool. There was no human review. Nobody noticed the name on the brass plaque in the lobby until Nora was already standing in front of it. Ferranti Group. You think you know what she does next. She turns around. She cancels the contract. She walks away. She doesn't. And the reason she doesn't, that decision, made in 11 seconds in a marble lobby, is what puts her daughter in danger 3 months later. Hold on. She stood in that lobby for 11 seconds. She counted. Then she walked to the building manager's office, confirmed the scope, and signed the service agreement. Not because she wasn't afraid, because she had made a rule for herself 4 years ago, standing outside a building in 19° in December, with nowhere to go. She would not let fear make decisions. She had earned that rule. She was not going to give it back now. The first 2 weeks were clean. Her crew worked evenings. The top floors where Dominic operated were deserted by the time they arrived. Nora came once a week to supervise, signed off with the building manager, and was gone before anyone on the upper floors could have known she'd been in the building. She thought she could sustain this indefinitely. On the 3rd week, a fire suppression sensor on the 9th floor malfunctioned at 2:19 in the afternoon and triggered a full evacuation. 300 people hit the stairwells. The elevators locked under protocol. Nora was on the 11th floor doing a final quality check with Mila beside her. School had ended early. She had no one to call, and Mila had learned long ago to sit quietly with a small wooden toy car and wait while her mother worked. They went down with the crowd. Dominic came down from the 15th. Between the 9th and 10th floor, the exit door jammed. The line stopped. Bodies pressed close. And in the pause, and that specific random pause that no one planned, and no one could have engineered, Nora turned and looked up. Dominic was looking down. 6 years compressed into 2 seconds. He was older. There were new lines at the corners of his eyes, and a thread of gray at his left temple that hadn't been there before. But the stillness was the same. That particular quality of his attention, the way he looked at something when he was trying to understand it completely before he said a word. He said her name, just her name. Like a question that had been waiting so long to be asked, it barely remembered what shape it was supposed to take. She said his last name, one word. Flat, polite, unbridgeable. Then the door below them opened, and the crowd moved, and she turned and walked, and did not look back. In the lobby, Mila was waiting in a chair by the east wall, the wooden toy car in her lap, watching the crowd with the calm curiosity she brought to everything. When the little girl looked up, she looked directly at Dominic with silver-gray eyes that had no shyness in them at all. He stopped walking. Those eyes, he had seen them before. Every morning, in the mirror, he stood in the center of his own lobby, 300 people moving around him, and did not move for a long time. That night, his financial director, Reyes, placed a file on his desk without being asked. She had been anticipating it since the day she'd read the name Vail on the vendor contract, and she had said nothing, because she was not paid to say anything until she was. The file was thorough. Nora Vasile, 32, one daughter, Mila, age 5. Father listed on the birth certificate as blank. Dominic read the word blank and set the file down. Then he picked up his phone and called his half-brother Marco in Milan. Marco answered on the third ring. He used the easy, sociable voice of a man who has not yet been told the accounting has arrived. Dominic did not say hello. He said, "I have the transfer log from the East Wing terminal. I have the maintenance record for the internal corridor camera. And I have the date." A pause. "You have one opportunity to tell me yourself." There was a silence on the line, long enough that Dominic could hear Milan traffic in the background, a city Marco had relocated to 2 months after Nora left, which had never struck anyone as particularly significant until right now. Then Marco talked. It took 4 minutes. Gambling debts to a syndicate that had accepted an internal trade in lieu of payment, access to household financial systems, a scapegoat who had no ability to fight back. He had assumed she would leave Chicago entirely. He had not planned for her to stay. He had not planned for a child. He said the word sorry twice, quickly, the way people say it when they're hoping it ends a conversation. Dominic ended the call without responding. He sat in the study of the estate, the same room, the same desk, and he stayed very still for a long time. What rose in him was not rage. Rage was an emotion he understood, had an architecture for, could move through efficiently. What rose instead was something older and quieter, the recognition of a specific kind of damage that cannot be undone, that can only be accounted for. He had fired an innocent woman. He had not listened, had not asked, had looked at footage of a corridor and decided he already knew the answer, because in his world, decisions made that quickly were a form of power. And she had walked out into November rain carrying his daughter. He did not call her that night. He sat with it, which was itself unusual, because Dominic Ferranti was not a man who sat with things. He moved things. He resolved things. He acted. But this was not something he could act his way out of. This required him to do the thing he had never once, in 37 years, chosen to do first. He would have to ask, "I need you to stay right here, because what happens when Nora picks up that phone is not what you think. It's not relief. It's not closure. It is the most dangerous moment in the entire story. And the reason is a 5-year-old girl with a wooden toy car." The call came 2 days later. Nora let it ring 4 times. On the 5th, she picked up and said nothing. She waited. He said, "I know about Marco." She said nothing. "I know what the camera didn't show." "I know it wasn't you." A pause, and in the pause, something shifted in his voice, something she had never once heard from him in 3 years. "And I know about Mila." The kitchen was very quiet. The ceiling fan turned slowly. Nora looked at her own hand on the counter, the same hand that had signed her name under his lawyer's eyes 6 years ago, and kept it flat and still. She said, "What do you want?" He could have said many things. He had probably prepared many things. But what came out was short and unpolished and unmistakably true. "I want to know her. 3 seconds. I'll call you back," she said. She hung up. She walked to Mila's room and stood in the doorway, the small figure on the bed, dark hair on the pillow, the wooden toy car on the knitstand placed there carefully before sleep, because Mila treated objects she valued with an instinctive care that Nora had never taught her and could not fully explain. Silver gray eyes closed. Nora stood there for a long time. She was not deciding whether to call him back. She had already decided. She was memorizing this exact version of her life, the one where it was only the two of them, the one she had built and maintained and protected before the door she was about to open changed the shape of everything. She was giving it a proper goodbye.